So I'm Jeff, work here at Blue Mountain Outfitters, talking about paddle selection today. Probably the most important thing you want to get right is your length, and that's going to be based on the relationship of you and the water. So how wide is your boat? How high is your seat? Are you sitting down in your boat versus one of the more elevated seats that a lot of fishing kayaks feature today? You are definitely going to want a longer paddle if you are higher up from the water than if you are closer to it. If you have a more narrow boat versus a wider boat, same relationship. You're going to want a longer paddle for a wider boat and vice versa, shorter for a more narrow. Alright, so I am in the Bonafide P127, their pedal drive fishing kayak. 127 first to the length. It's a 12-foot 7-inch boat. Uses the Propel pedal drive system. The paddle I'm holding is Bending Branch's Angler Classic. It's a fiberglass shaft. You've got, if I can get my hands out of the way, ruler across the shaft. It's a 2-piece paddle. Pretty basic. One other little feature on the blade is your hook retriever. If you get your line caught up in something that can help you get it back. I am using a 260. You would not want to go shorter than that probably in this boat. You could go a little longer for different factors. If you are a bigger person than me, taller, bigger frame, farther away from the water, might want to consider 270, 280. Also, if you plan on maybe standing in this and paddling upright, again, you're getting yourself further away from the water. Maybe go with a extendable shaft where you can stretch it out. You know, make those in 250, 270, 260, 280. Not a bad idea if you think you're going to be both paddling from the seat as well as standing. So another thing to consider with any paddle, straight shaft versus bent. Straight is the more traditional, more common that you'll see. Nothing wrong with it. It's preference typically, but what you are going to get out of a bent shaft that the straight doesn't offer is a design that is supposed to reduce fatigue with each stroke. Concept is it puts your hands and wrists in an alignment that basically makes you work less. That is the idea behind it. With all bent shafts versus straight, we'll pay a little higher price. They do run on the higher end as opposed to the standard shafts that are a little more affordable. One more thing, like we were talking with bent and straight, the unpopular, least fun topic is cost. You're looking at a aluminum paddle. That is going to be your most economical. It is also going to be your heaviest. So pay a little less, but your swing weight's going to be higher for sure. Moving up from there, both in cost but dropping in weight, fiberglass shaft that we first look at, that is going to weigh a little less, cost you a little more. When you get into carbon fiber, it is your lightest weight, stiffest material, so kind of the cream of the crop as far as paddle shaft materials go. Naturally, you're going to pay the most for those.
I wasn't going to interrupt Jeff at Blue Mountain Outfitters for one reason, and that's that everything that he was saying about paddle choice for kayak anglers is common opinion. It's just what people are. It's what most people in kayak fishing have been doing for a while, and it's having those paddles that are 250, 260, 270 and longer because of the belief that, oh, you need because we have these wider and wider boats. This is my paddle. It's an old adventure technology with a bent shaft. It's 230. I'm happy with 230. I'm happy with 240. Anything longer than that, I just feel like it's too much. And I'll come back to that in a moment as to why I want a shorter. And the biggest thing though that really wasn't said in that video is that you should purchase the lightest weight paddle that you can afford. And here's one big reason why. If it is, especially if it's your primary propulsion, if this is what you're doing to get around, and even if you're not, this is the equivalent of having, you know, a 110-pound thrust trolling motor as opposed to a 45. If you have more power, because it's super lightweight, and this is a carbon fiber, you know, with a bent shaft. We'll talk about bent shaft in a minute, but it's a very lightweight paddle. There's a lot of good lightweight paddles out there. Let me talk about the length. You know, when I'm fishing and I have this on my lap, which isn't always. A lot of times I'm using the motor and I'm using foot control steering, and then this is holstered. This is put on the, you know, a roto grip or paddle park or somewhere. It's kind of put away. But when I'm shallow, which is a lot of the fisheries that I'm in, I keep this right on my lap so that I can have quick access to it. You know, I'm out there fishing, but then I can quickly pick this up, and I one-hand it. When I one-hand it, if you have a 250, 260, it's just too much wrist strength for most people, even with a super lightweight one. If you have a heavy one, if you say, I'm only gonna spend 60, 70 bucks on a paddle, okay, you're not getting the power that you could if you spend, and you can look at the pricing of them. What happens is people buy that $70 paddle to start out with, and then they borrow a friend's paddle that's like $150, right? And then, you know, they say this is so much better and they're happier with it, and then they borrow another friend's paddle or just even pick it up. Once you pick up a lightweight paddle, you're like, ooh, it's worth it to buy that, you know, $200+ paddle first, because you've just wasted money buying an $80 and a $140 paddle, and now you have 3 paddles. Get the good one first. Now, with regard to length, you know, this is a 230. I can do the one-hand paddling. I can get some elbow power on there so that when, say, I've snagged a jig up there and I just need to get maybe 15 feet further upstream, I can put my elbows on there. The bent shaft allows me to, you know, it cradles my elbow so I can use my bicep and do this. But because it's carbon fiber, because it's a really lightweight paddle, I can do all that. But if this was this length, or say it was a carbon fiber, it's just as light, but you gave it more length, it comes down to the physics of longer levers. When the wind starts blowing and it's that much further out, it's gonna blow off your lap. It's gonna constantly be, you know, when you have it here on your lap, and it's only as long as it needs to be for you to get a good dig. And I use this paddle on boats that are 38, 40 inches wide, no problem. I don't do as much high position paddling, and people say, well, that's it. That's why I'm going to get the 280. No, you don't need that. You're making you're forcing something that once you actually start using the paddle, it's unwieldy. It's just too big. I got one that's a 220. That's maybe a little bit too short. It'd be great for the Shoaly, which is a little more narrow boat. But even the inflatables that I'm using, or the Take 2, that's a very wide boat. I can do that with the 230, and I have no problem doing a sculling draw, you know, paddling aggressively through whitewater. I got to do a video on torso rotation. too many people are getting that wrong and they're paddling with their arms. Anyhow, when you're choosing a paddle, and it's going to be hard to find one, because what's predominantly out there is not this bent shaft. They're straight, and they're kayak angler paddlers that are 250 and longer. Maybe look at some of the whitewater paddles, and to go up to 230 is sort of long for a for a whitewater paddle. They're out there. You're gonna have to do some shopping. You're gonna have to ignore the advice of Jeff at Blue Mountain Outfitters, although a lot of the advice he gave was great. But in terms of the length, I'm happy with the 230. It's my choice. I'm also really happy that I can one-hand this bent shaft paddle and still operate the fishing rod and drop it down in my lap. Also, that bent shaft tends to stay on my legs. It doesn't, because it's straight, when the wind catches it, it always goes back to the position that I expect it to be in. Whereas if it's straight, it could be in any different position, and then when you go to apply force to this, you've grabbed it and it's like, oh, I'm cutting through the water instead of flat scooping it where I expect it to be. So, bunch of different reasons why I recommend, say, a 230, maybe 240, not 250, 60, 70, 80. Get your shorter, which to me is normal, 230, maybe 240 inch paddle. Look for a bent shaft and buy the lightest weight paddle that you can afford. Do it first. It's worth making that purchase and making your paddling experience so much better for years to come. This particular blade was designed for high angle paddling. So blades that are fairly, that are more narrow or more, I'm gonna say teardrop shape, are for low angle paddling. If you're down in a like a touring kayak and you're paddling, if your seating position is low, it's a different shape than this, as opposed to this where it's a more aggressive whitewater where you're going downward. So the angle of the blade is high as opposed to the angle of the blade is low. Low angle paddling, high angle paddling. The high angle paddling shape of the blade looks like that. It kind of gets wide and then just kind of chops flat, as opposed to a more oval shape and a narrower blade throughout. Let me go find a low angle paddle shape blade and show you that in comparison to this high angle blade on this one right here. All right, I found a low angle blade. See how that's kind of more oval shaped? This is a relic, another old adventure technology. So good for the low angle, low seating position. High angle, a little bit higher seating position, a little bit more aggressive. You're paddling next to your boat instead of out here. So say you're gonna ignore my advice to go with a, say, 230, 240, and you are gonna go with something that's 250, 250, or 260, 270, you definitely want, which one do you want? You're gonna be sitting in a higher seat, maybe you buy into all that, and you're still gonna be so far out. I don't think the low angle paddle blade shape is going to make as much sense, because you're going to be way out there, which the low angle Yeah, low angle blade is going to make more sense for your longer ones. But again, consider shorter and high angle blade shape, and I'm telling you, you can do this. You can do what you need to do, especially when handing, you know, with the carbon fiber super light. You can do everything you need to with a 230 high angle blade. There aren't many out there. Good luck finding them.